If you are looking to read short stories, particularly Indian short stories, then I've got a book for you. It's a collection of classic Malayalam stories. It's called The Second Marriage of Kunju Namboodiri and Other Classic Malayalam Stories. The series is edited by Mini Krishnan, translated by Venugopal Menon. Mini Krishnan, as she writes in the book, she has been collecting short stories from different parts of India and creating different series of short stories. So I will talk about those different books also. Today I'm going to focus on this one, the Malayalam short stories. So let's discuss them. Let's discuss the book. All these short stories, they were written or published rather during 1890 almost to 1930. This was really the early period of short story writing in Malayalam literature. And a lot of these short stories have very simple narrative, and a lot of times they have a particular social message. So that seems to be the motivation behind writing these short stories, to put out a message out there. Some are also quite amusing, so probably they were meant to entertain the readers. And slowly we see the gradual development of the short story format as we read the stories from 1890 to 1931s. So for example, let me give you a simple example. The first story, that is called Instinctive Mischief. It's about a thief who is just reflecting on this idea about how bad a thief he has been. And then he regrets his decision of being a thief, and he wants to go to Kashi on a pilgrimage. And it's just him thinking out loud. So let me read the first paragraph of this short story, and it will give you some idea about the kind of writing there is. It goes, "Among the people who have been punished by law, there is no more unfortunate than I. This is not to say that there isn't anybody who hasn't suffered or isn't suffering more than me. But those who have deserved punishment for their own idiotic actions are rare. That is what makes me sad. There is no indignity in suffering the dangers brought upon us by God. To be outwitted by intelligent police officers is also bearable. Falling into the trap set by oneself is not insufferable. But there is no end to the regret born of knowing that even an intelligent child could tell that it was an inescapable trap. This is what they call insult." So that's how humorously he introduces himself and what's going on with his life. And he's talking about his own stupidity here. Then in the subsequent paragraphs, he introduces himself. He talks about how he comes from the forest land of Kochi, how he got into this profession, and eventually how he ended up in jail. And then finally he ends the story by saying that having completed my term in jail, here I am free once more. A man so incompetent, if he continues in the profession, it would be a slur on his fourth father. People say that stealing is bad. Let me set aside my lineage and my profession. I must take a dip in the Ganges and pray at Kashi Vishwanath temple to rid myself of the sins I've committed and to never again think of performing such a deed. My grandmother would recite every day at sunset. Sacred rites and holy fasts mentioned in Vedas do not erase sins or purify nor do they raise the instincts in us. Eternal service alone removes dualities, so teaches Lord Vishnu. And that's how he ends it. A thief tries to be a good man, to be a holy man, but along the way he mentions the kind of stupidities or silly mistakes that he has committed. And now, clearly, he regrets it. He moves on to the other part. So, that's the first, really, the first short story in Malayalam literature uh, that was ever written or published. And you can see the simplicity in it. The author is, through the protagonist, is just putting out the thoughts. That's all. There's no plot or no other complication. It's just meant to amuse the readers. And humor seems to be quite a common theme in many of these stories. In fact, probably the most humorous story that I found was Cuny's Remedy. And it's really a kind of a satire which makes fun of a popular nature therapy, and how there's a poor couple, they don't have money, and this man who doesn't want to do anything to earn money. Instead, he devises this scheme that they should go on a different diet plan, and by that they'll be able to save money, and by saving money you are essentially making more money. And he starts thinking that that way we will become rich. So that was quite a funny one. And especially in that particular story, what I found the most interesting part was right at the beginning, the banter between the husband and wife. And that's where the story really begins. So let me read this initial few passages for you, and you'll get an idea what I'm talking about. So just the initial description first. Seated on the corner of a tattered reed mat, spread out on the southern end of the eastern veranda of my house, I was daydreaming of meaningless things, flicking off now and then the stubborn flies trying to settle on my nose. My wife came holding a net and sat next to me. "There's no rice left," she said. "There's no money either," I say. "So how can we cook?" "Not unless we get a loan." "It's always loan, loan, loan. When are you going to repay all this?" "Repay? I take loans with no intention of repaying them as far as possible." "Wonderful. When you borrow in times of hardship, shouldn't you pay back when you have the means?" "My policy is to take loans whenever I can." "What on earth for? Is it a good thing to have creditors all over the town?" "Why not? When I die, won't the whole town mourn? Isn't that a matter of prestige? To earn respect even in death, is that a small thing?" "Enough. Shame in life and prestige at death. Do you want to have a meal only after you are dead?" "The rice rights after death must be for that." Talking silly when we discuss something important has now become a habit with you. Speaking one's mind is the sign of an honest man. Well, honesty won't sustain life. After I came to live with you, all my silks and jewelry have vanished, leave alone all my problems. Can't you think about earning for the sake of our poor children? Thought in any matter is detrimental. Except to do what comes to mind at all times. Planning to do something is rubbish. When you act on instinct, it may bring good or bad results, whereas when you plan your actions, the result is always negative. This is just another of your quirks. Never if the bug that bites us and makes us jump out of bed and remains on the sheets contemplating its next move instead of disappearing into the folds of the bedspread, what will become of it? I understand none of your neo-philosophy. The example of the bug is an old one. Is the bug a creature that evolved recently? Let the bug evolve or devolve for all I care. Tell me about what I asked you without planning, as you say. About what? About making money. What is so difficult about it? I have found a way. Really? Then we have won. What is the way you have found? Have you heard about the remedy of Kuni? But for the fact that Kuni is aggressive, does he also have a method of treatment? The Kuni you talk about is a hunchback. I'm talking about the German, Louis Kuni. The remedial treatment is his. Aren't you old enough already? When can you begin making money having spent so much time learning the method of treatment to become a Vedyan? We won't be treating anyone, we'll treat ourselves. Well, getting treated to make money is news to me. Then let me tell you, Kuni's treatment needs none of the usual concoctions or condiments of a normal meal. No salt, no chilies, no firewood, no fish, no meat, no cooking. No servants, male or female. The result? Better than that of eating ash gourd. Benefit? More than that of the celestial bow. But where will the money come from? I don't understand anything you say. I need no father, no mother, neither wife or children. If you chant this the whole day, will money bubble up from nowhere? If you don't have the patience to hear me out, how will you understand? But how can I tolerate your drivel? You can call it drivel only after having heard me out. As far as I have heard, I see no logic in anything you say. If the logic part is yet to come, I shall listen patiently. Then listen. If expenditure is less and income more, isn't that profit? Yes. Isn't the lifestyle I described profitable to us? If it comes about, maybe, yes. We will make it happen. We have the strength to do it. We don't spend money on non-essential things anyway. How else can we reduce our expenses? That is exactly what I'm saying. We will adopt Kuni's method of treatment, a remedy for all our troubles. What ailment do we have to undergo for this treatment? Is there a medicinal remedy for lack of money? Are you senile already? Well, I'm perfectly fine, so is my opinion. So what's the treatment? You should be asking that. And that's how the banter goes on and on for quite a long time. And eventually he explains how they can save money and just live a really frugal life where they go on fasting. They don't eat much. It's like get to the bare minimum. And as the story goes on, it gets funnier because this man who, although he wants to pursue this approach, but is tempted to eat food. And then it unfolds in more interesting ways. So that's how the story goes. And I'm sure when you'll read it, you'll also find it hilarious. So slowly when we read all these different stories, we notice that the message gets more deeper as you read the short stories from 1900s, 1910s, 20s and into 1930. You see different messages coming across. For example, the title one, The Second Marriage of Kunju Namboodiri. We get to know about Namboodiri community, the kind of challenges those Namboodiri women faced, how some of the men were having more than one wife, and also there was a bit of hierarchy among these wives. So all these equations of religion and caste and class, all these equations, they start coming. And the stories get a bit longer and more complicated in terms of their themes, in terms of their ideas. And then we get to the story of 1930. It's called The Lifespan of Aisakutti Umma. Then we see a bit of history also added there. The history is about the Tipu Sultan and his invasion of Malabar region and what happened there. So setting is there, historical, based on reality, but obviously the characters and the story itself, that has been fictionalized. So let me read a few paragraphs from the story where they just set up the background of the story and what was going on then. Tipu Sultan and his army had advanced south, sword in one hand and beef in the other, like demons of destruction, from Mangalore, and had reached Kozhikode. The rulers of Kolathiri, Kottayam, Nadu, Kadatha and others, along with their close relatives, overlords, and dependents, had relinquished their principalities, boarded catamarans and dhows docked at sea, and sought refuge in the land of His Excellency, that is, the Zamorin of Kozhikode. In all this melee, a ship had arrived at the Bepur harbour to take the kings of Parapanad and their close associates to Travancore, which was Thiruvathamkur back then. In the domain of the Parapanad kings, a prominent overlord was the Lord of Nanambara. During the period of his turmoil in 1784, the head of Parapanad was his Lordship Veera Varman. His prime minister was Nanambara Kurupu. Although the Mohammedans in Kozhikode, Eranadu and Ponnani had sworn allegiance to the Zamorin when Tipu Sultan's atrocities targeting Hinduism began, all the Muslims turned informers and helped the marauding Mysore army. There were two designs underlying this attack by Tipu Sultan: to make the people of Kerala surrender to the Muslim faith and loot and confiscate all the wealth they possibly could. Other than these two intentions, Tipu had no desire to conquer and rule this region. The extreme degradation resorted to by Tipu's army included, to cite a few examples, demolition of all sacred icons, raping of women, defecating in temples, burning record books, entering homes, terrorizing inmates, driving them out, murdering religious heads and those with a scientific bent of mind, and finally unleashing turmoil in the society through hooliganism. By the time the battle march of the Sultan reached such diabolical dimensions to cause so much carnage, his army had doubled in size as it marched from Mangalore to Kozhikode. Traitors and defectors among the Malayalis became the informers of the army and helped the siege in whichever way they could. Under the circumstances, it was of little surprise that people abandoned their homes and moved to other lands in search of refuge. So that's the kind of background setting. Tipu Sultan's army is attacking local rulers who are Hindu at that time. Many of them are running away, and that's really the first scene after this setting that we get to know this woman who's just trying to protect herself. She's pregnant, she's undergoing labor pains, and that specific night she delivers a baby girl, and the same night the woman dies, and then this baby girl somehow survives, and then there comes this Muslim man who adopts her and raises her as a Muslim girl. And then at some point towards the end of the story, Uh, this girl finds out about her identity, and we see then what happens. So we can see the more complications in the stories, whether the dynamics of different religions, the history, the kingdoms, all these narratives, they are getting complicated with time, and we can see them growing, these narratives growing in terms of themes, their plot structures, their writings, growing with time. And then we get to the point of 1930s, which, by the way, is the period after which the short story in Malayalam goes to another level with the arrival of people like Takazi and Muhammad Bashir. And then you see a different level of Malayalam writing in the short story format. So, to come back to this book, if you want to understand the life of rural Kerala back then, the kind of society as it was, the kind of social structures they were back then, if you want to have a glimpse into that, this is the book you must read, and I'm sure you'll really enjoy. You'll enjoy the writing, you'll enjoy looking at into the past, and I'm sure you'll get to learn a lot of things. So that's what this book is all about, and I'm sure you'll get a chance to read it. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll come back with another book next time. Thank you.